October the 23rd of 1983, 241 Marines were blown apart at the barracks in Lebanon. And the reason I want to start with this is because I want to read one paragraph from President Reagan after the bombing. It is in a book called The American Life Autobiography of Ronald Reagan. In the weeks immediately after the bombing, I believe the last thing we should do was turn tail and leave. Yet the irrationality of Middle Eastern politics forced us to rethink our policy. If there would have been some rethinking of policy before our men died, we would be a lot better off if that policy had changed towards more of a neutral position and neutrality. Those 241 Marines would be alive today. I thank Mr. Reagan for having the courage to look at the situation and to understand that the Middle East can be a jungle. That brings me to this point in my question. I represent the 3rd District of North Carolina, 60,000 retired military in the district, Camp Lejeune Marine Base, Cherry Point Marine Air Station. And in 5 days, we received over 415 telephone calls. We also received over 1,000 emails in that same period of time. 97% said no to this action in Syria. I had even Marines to call from Camp Lejeune, did not identify themselves or their ranks, to say, please register me as a no in going into Syria. So my question to all three of you, how will we determine that these strikes are successful? What contingency plans are in place if other countries take aggressive action as a result of our strikes? Do we really believe that Hezbollah, Iran, Russia will simply stand by and watch? Those last two questions are very important to me as a representative, but it's also very important to the thousands of people in the 3rd District of North Carolina. Let me repeat two of them very quickly. What contingency plans are in place if other countries take aggressive action as a result of our strikes? Do we believe that Hezbollah, Iran, Russia will simply stand by and watch? If you could answer those two questions, and I have other questions, Mr. Chairman, I would like to submit in writing for the record with a response back in writing. I ask unanimous consent. If you gentlemen could answer those two questions, I would be greatly appreciative.
Go ahead, Marty. You want to talk about the deterrence?
Yeah, I can talk about the risk. You're asking about the risk of retaliation, we specifically are asking about Russia and Iran, and we assess that the risk of retaliation, because of the limited nature of the strike, is low. I can't drive it to zero, and I can tell you that we are postured in the region in order to deal with any miscalculation or retaliation.
General, very quickly, innocent people will be killed. I mean, that's a given in war, I would believe. Innocent people in Syria will be killed. Is that an assumption that I can assume would be correct?
You can make that assumption because war is an imperfect science, to be sure, but you can also be sure that part of the targeting criteria I've been given by the President is to achieve a collateral damage estimate of low, which is I could talk to you in classified setting about what that means.
Mr. Secretary of Defense, would you answer the two questions, and then I would like the Secretary of State, if possible.
Congressman, first on your comments concerning your constituents as well as General Dempsey and mine, the Marines. Please don't let them send me to Syria, I believe was the paraphrase. First, I just want to remind everybody that's not the objective. That's not what is in the resolution of authorization. That is not why the President came to Congress. It is not about sending Marines to Syria. Regarding your questions, as I said in my statement, Congressman, there are always risks and consequences to action. But I also said there are risks and consequences to no action. I believe as firmly as I'm sitting here this morning, and I think I have some justification for believing this, that if no response from the international community occurs to what Assad has most recently done on August 21st and other actions he's taken prior to that, he will do it again. We will be back here revisiting this issue at some point. And the next time we revisit this, it may well be about direct American casualties and the potential security of this country. We have planned for, in every possible way, months of planning, Congressman, on the contingencies that you talked about. What ifs, where are assets deployed? Are we prepared? What are we anticipating? From the State Department security offices, we spend days with Secretary Kerry's people anticipating hits on our embassy, our consulate, our American interests around the world. There is no operation perfect. I can't guarantee anything, but I would leave it at that, Congressman. Thank you.
Gentleman's time expired. Ms. Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've written my questions down because I've really thought a lot about every single word in these. And these two questions, or a set of questions I'm going to ask, are for Secretary Kerry. In articulating the basis for military action against Syria, the President and many in the administration have placed great emphasis on the moral and the legal dimensions of the issue. I believe you called the attack on civilians a moral obscenity, and one of the principal justifications has been the alleged violations of the laws of war for use by chemical weapons. So I have two questions. Would you please define the circumstances in which you believe deliberate targeting of civilians will lead to an American intervention? Why not in every case? Why not in Homs, where thousands of civilians died and we did nothing? Is the U.S. or the Obama administration committing itself to military action in every case in the future where civilians are deliberately targeted in internal conflict, or only when chemical weapons are used? That's the first one. And secondly, do you agree enforcement of the chemical weapons ban and other violations of international law of war must comply with the fundamental framework of the UN Charter for use of military force between